Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Tonight, we step into a world not bound by the rules of logic, one where the veil between the living and the dead is almost non-existent, even if only for a moment. There are places where every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of a light, it could mean something far more than a draft or a faulty bulb. But why do these spirits stay? What do they seek from us? Some ghosts may walk beside us quietly, never intending harm, seeking closure. Some lingering for reasons unknown, offering only a fleeting chill. But others come with a purpose, dark, unsettling, reminding us of what we fear most, the unknown. Tonight, we explore both sides of the spectral coin, tales of haunted locations and restless spirits that make us question the world we live in. Not every ghost story is a nightmare, but some will leave you checking over your shoulder, wondering if you're truly alone. So, let's get started, shall we? For a very short time, I lived in a haunted house, which was my family's house. I was raised by my maternal grandparents, my mom still going away to college when she had me. My grandfather built the house for my grandmother back in the 60s. He acquired many of the materials from a hospital that had burnt down. Nothing ever happened in the house until my husband and I were ready to move out after I received an inheritance from my grandparents. The house was big, 36 by 40, and had a finished basement with a bachelor. My husband and I had the first level, while my great-aunt, grandfather's sister, lived in the bachelor in the basement. Our living room was just above her bed. Because it was an open space, the dining room area was above her living room. One night, my husband and I were watching television, and we were hearing humming. We obviously thought that it was my great-aunt because the voice sounded exactly like hers. Then, not long after, I heard my name. Often, when my great-aunt had something to tell me or wanted to ask something, she would come to the basement entrance, which was below the kitchen, and I could hear her very well. I answered, nothing. My husband asked me to call her again. Nothing. Then, when I was about to sit on the couch, I hear my name a second time. I went downstairs. I knocked on her door. Nothing. I was worried. I thought maybe she had fallen down or something. Nothing. Her door was locked. She only locked her door when she left. I climbed up the stairs and decided to see out the kitchen window, the one that overviewed the driveway. And like I suspected, no cars except my husband's. Just before I was about to let him know, he said, "Hey, isn't tonight her bingo night?" We heard more humming, but not my name. When my great-aunt was back, I asked her if she sang or called me, and of course she answered no. I was out playing bingo. I left around 4. This happened between 7 and 10 p.m. No one else in the house. Nothing was malicious, but because I had never lived in a haunted place, it was enough to have my curiosity piqued. And I won't lie, I would love to have another experience as such. But if I never do, I'll surely never forget this one. It was the summer. I was 24, about to cross that invisible line into 25, and life had that wide-open feel. I was working a seasonal job in Gardner, Montana, just outside the north gate of Yellowstone. The town was small and sleepy, nestled between rugged mountains and that endless sky. Tourists came and went, eager to experience the wild beauty of the park, but for me, it was just where I slept, ate, and worked. I'd rented a modest cabin for the season, rustic, nothing fancy, but it had its charms. At least that's what I thought at first. I remember that night vividly. The air was thick with the smell of pine as usual, but there was a faint sulfur smell, presumably from Yellowstone's geothermal springs, a smell that you never quite got used to, a smell that wasn't usually this strong. Normally, the sound of wind pushing through the trees and creaking the cabin was comforting, natural, but something about it felt wrong that night. The wind felt heavier, and I woke up suddenly, though I couldn't remember hearing any noises that could have disturbed me. My heart was pounding in my chest, as if I'd sprinted a mile. I blinked, trying to make sense of the dim room around me, and then I saw something. At first I thought that I was still dreaming, an old woman, floating above my bed. She wasn't standing. She wasn't even hovering like you might picture a ghost would. Her body was stretched horizontally, parallel to mine, suspended mid-air. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. It wasn't possible, and yet there she was, maybe 2 feet above me, her face pale, gaunt, and framed by thin, wispy hair that floated as if she was in water. I found that I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. My body felt paralyzed, though I'm not sure if it was fear or something else keeping me still. Her eyes, they were the worst part. They were open, wide, staring directly into mine, dark and empty, but not blind. No, she was looking at me, seeing me. I wanted to scream, to close my eyes, to wake up and shake this nightmare away, but I couldn't. Time stretched out. Seconds felt like hours, and she just floated there, silent, watching. I could hear my breath shallow and rapid. It was the only sound in the room. For a moment, I thought I saw her lips twitch, like she was going to speak, but nothing came out. I didn't want to know what she had to say. I just wanted her to leave, to disappear, but she stayed. And then, she disappeared. Slowly, she began to drift backwards. Her body receded into the far corner of the room, her form becoming more indistinct, like smoke dissolving into the air. But those eyes, those cold, dark eyes, never left mine, not until she vanished entirely. I lay there for what felt like hours, my body still frozen in place, and my mind racing, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Sleep paralysis, maybe. A waking dream. That had to be it. But deep down, I knew better. There was something else, something I couldn't explain away so easily. The next morning, I tried to brush it off, but the memory clung to me. It was heavy and unsettling. I avoided looking at the corner of the room where she had disappeared. Something about that space felt different now, darker. I packed my things and spent the rest of the season sleeping with the light on. It didn't help. It's been over 15 years since that night, and I still think about it, constantly. I never told anyone, not really. How could I? It sounded insane. But no matter how many times I replay it in my mind, I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't a dream. That she was real, in her own way, and that she wasn't just there by accident. Gardner is a strange place, perched on the edge of something wild and ancient. The locals talk about spirits, about the land being haunted by things older than we can understand. Maybe she was one of them. drawn to me for reasons I don't know. But whatever she was, wherever she came from, she left her mark, and I'll never forget her face. My family moved into our current house in 2012 after the elderly couple who had previously lived here had died within months of each other. Aside from superstition, all I knew about them was that they had left behind a middle-aged son who had sold us the house, and they'd also left various trinkets of theirs in the house. These included bottles of holy water, some ornaments, and a spoon with a teddy bear and the name Lucia engraved on it, probably a christening gift. The house was very old-fashioned. The wallpaper had been up for decades and the built-in furniture was rotting. This led to most of the rooms needing to be redecorated and rebuilt. This included the bathroom, which was originally the toilet in one room and the bath and sink in a separate room. I should also note that when you reach the top of the stairs, the bathroom door is directly on your left. One night when I went into the bathroom and shut the door behind me, next to the door stands a towel rack, and opposite that is a mirrored bathroom cabinet above the sink. The cabinet reflected a young girl from the shoulders up. It felt like a millisecond, but I saw her long enough to see that she had wavy, light blonde hair, was tall and skinny, and wearing a maroon blazer and tie. She was facing me, but had a nonchalant facial expression. Before I could turn to look at her, having realized that she would be standing next to me, her body in the mirror seemed to tilt backwards before she faded into nothingness. My mom was really spooked when I told her what I had seen, as she described a dream, one that involved a girl who matched the same description, running playfully down the stairs through the downstairs hallway. She said that every time the girl was about to reach the kitchen, this footage in her mind would go to static and then replay on a loop. My younger brother, who would have been about 7 at the time, stated a girl would come into his room, sit at the end of his bed, and sing. However, this may have just been him going along with the discussion, but who knows? Some other freaky occurrences were that people often saw a tall man in a suit and a top hat behind the car in the rearview mirror when reversing out of our driveway. The living room would also sometimes fill with the smell of cigar smoke. It would appear hazy, despite no one smoking. My mom also once attempted a house cleaning ritual involving burning a candle and saying a chant before it burnt out. When my stepdad called her downstairs as the candle was almost burnt out, she felt her feet being pulled from beneath her, and something pushed her downstairs. By the time she reached the bottom, the candle had already burnt out. Thus, she never got to finish the ritual. We've described strange events to 3 different psychics, and without hearing any of the details, all 3 described similar stories of the previous owners having 2 children, including a daughter who had died from a neck injury from falling down the stairs when she was around 7. 2 of the psychics described the man as the girl's grandfather. He was trying to help her move on. Additionally, they all gave accounts of the girl while alive sitting inside the built-in wardrobe in my room during the night, and then going into my brother's room to talk to her brother. One said that the only way that she would leave is if we knocked out the built-in furniture in the room. I'm usually a skeptic when it comes to these kinds of things, but I don't doubt what I saw or the matching accounts of 3 different people. I should also note that since I knocked out my wardrobes about 3 years ago, there's been no additional occurrences. I've believed in spirits, but I've never had my own experience. Not until I moved into a 1930s cabin in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Lone Pico, if you're familiar with the area. It's the neighborhood where Jerry Garcia lost his finger as a child. The finger was never recovered, fun fact, but that's another story. The cabin was absolutely quaint, with a huge wraparound deck above the redwoods. Magical. We were immediately in love. The only creepy thing I noticed at first was that the laundry room or basement was only accessible by stairs outside of the house, meaning if you needed to wash at night, you had to go out in the pitch black darkness and down the stairs. Super creepy. To brighten the basement up, I strung a long string of fairy lights around, but due to the moisture, the batteries in the box corroded and I took them out. This is important for later in this story. My boyfriend at the time worked nights, so I was alone a lot. I would work on my computer in the living room, and fairly often, out of nowhere, I'd feel a presence standing in the hallway, watching me. Nothing was ever there, but it always came from that same place. One time, I dog-sat a cute old pup. The second his owner left the house, the dog started growling at the hallway and stood in front to protect me. I sort of smirked, thinking, how strange, he senses it too. And he didn't know me at all, no reason to protect me, really. Jump to a week before the big occurrence. I felt the presence in the hallway again and decided to speak to it. I went in the hallway and was like, listen, dude, you can be here, but you can't scare me like this. It's creeping me out. If you want to show your presence, just don't scare me. A week later, Santa Cruz was hit with the worst winter storm in 30 years, and our power was out for a week. One night, the boyfriend and I decided to go into town for a few hours. Before we left, we went around and turned off all the battery-powered lights that we had turned on. It's pitch black at night with no power. I turned off my headlamp, twinkle lights around the windows, and boyfriend turned off his flashlight. Then we headed into town. Around midnight, we returned. As we pulled into the driveway, every window in our house was pulsing light. I was totally freaked out. My boyfriend assured me that we must have left a light on. As we entered the cabin, I saw that all the twinkly lights were on blinking mode. I yelled for him to turn them off. There was no way I left them on. But he brushed me off. Except then, I looked at my headlamp on the table. It was also on blinking mode. Ghosts, ghosts, I yelled to him. And just as he was about to brush me off again, he entered the bedroom where his flashlight had been. He said, and brought the flashlight out. It was also on blink mode. I was excited for a little while, but eventually it wore off and I went to sleep. The next day, I forgot about it, and that evening I ventured down to the basement to do laundry. Remember how it's pitch black outside? As I approached the basement door, I gasped. From under the door, I saw blinking lights. I couldn't stop laughing, and I was in disbelief. I knew there were no batteries in that light box. I opened the door, and sure enough, my string lights were on blink mode, and there was no batteries in the box. All the connections still corroded with acid. The ghost did exactly what I had asked. It showed its presence in a way that didn't scare me. It was almost silly. I never felt him again in the house. Bakersfield locals know the Padre Hotel well. It's a landmark, a place where people go to enjoy dinner, drinks, and sometimes something else entirely. One night I was there taking photos. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. I live in town, so visiting the Padre for dinner felt routine. Being a wedding photographer, I'd spent a lot of time there. The building itself is elegant, with polished floors, refined decor, and a sense of old-world charm. But something about it also felt off. Couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but the more that you're there, the more you realize something else is too. Perhaps it was the occasional flicker of the lights, or the way the temperature seemed to drop the deeper into the restaurant you went. The Padre Hotel had seen its fair share of tragedy. In the 1950s, a devastating fire swept through the upper floors, claiming the lives of several families, most of them children. The memory of that night lingers in every hallway, in every corner. The hotel staff has tried, time and time again, to erase the signs of what happened. In one particular area of the restaurant, a child's handprint, small and smudged, it keeps reappearing on the wall. They've scrubbed it, painted over it, yet no matter what they do, it always returns, like the child's trying to remind us they never left. After dinner this night, I took a casual photo of the wall with the infamous handprint. It wasn't until I got home and examined the picture that my stomach turned. There, beside the handprint, was a shadowy figure. It was faint but unmistakable, a hazy outline of a person standing right next to it, watching. And that's when the stories that I'd heard about the Padre Hotel began to surface in my mind. Paranormal investigators had flocked to this place for years. Many claimed it to be one of the most active locations they'd ever encountered. Some spoke of a man who drowned mysteriously in his bathtub. Others whispered about a man who had leapt from the hotel's roof in an act of desperation and despair. Each death left a mark, like a stain on the soul of the hotel that no amount of renovation could wash away. And the strange happenings continue to this day. Water faucets turn on by themselves, and electrical malfunctions are commonplace, especially in rooms where guests have reported feeling watched. Bartenders speak of glasses sliding across the bar before crashing to the floor, and many have seen shadow figures darting out of the corner of their eyes, only to disappear when they look directly. Ever since the photo incident, I find myself incredibly curious every time I pass the Padre. I can't help but wonder what or who is still lingering inside. I guess I agree that the hotel is alive, not just with the hustle and bustle of guests, but with the spirits of former guests, ones refusing to be forgotten. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I primarily use these boards under a different account with vastly different types of posts. This one, though, I thought it touched on a personal level, so I gotta remain anonymous. But right now, I'm desperate for any input from fellow educators or child therapy specialists on how to go about handling a child's unique problem. The start of the year is in full force. I have a class of 15 truly wonderful children. Let's call one of them DJ. DJ is 5. His birth parents are out of the picture. Mom's addicted and dad's deceased. Thankfully, his grandparents have stepped in to take care of him. There's no worry about abuse or fetal alcohol syndrome or other traumas. He's still too young to really understand the family situation. He calls them Oma and Opa. At the beginning of the year, the grandmother, Oma, approached me and dropped a pretty heavy bomb. Opa had lung cancer. It progressed fast, and literally the second week of September, he passed. DJ was out for a few days after that, but returned to class the following Thursday. He was somber, but his friends were able to cheer him up towards the end of the day, and I was so grateful to give Grandma a smiling kid to buckle up that afternoon. The next week was as normal as could be given the circumstances. But the next Friday, September 20th, I think, I asked the kids what their weekend plans would be. 14 children tell me they're either going to the park or soccer or the movies, and then it's DJ's turn to tell me, "Me and Oma are going monster hunting." I asked what that means. Teachers, get your thinking caps on because you're going to be tested at the end of this. How should I respond? With the confidence of this information being common knowledge, DJ explains, "There's been something whistling and knocking on his window at night, but every time he opens the curtains, there's no one outside." I tell him, the wind likes to whistle a tune every now and then. He says, "No, it sounds like Opa." Then he tells me that he gets scared when it wakes him up. He doesn't like when Opa knocks on the window. I asked if he's told Oma. "Yes," he replies, "she's heard it too. And that's why they're going monster hunting that weekend." All I can say is, "Wow, you'll have to tell me what you caught on Monday." Like, how do you respond to that? In an attempt to get a non-child perspective on the situation, I pull Oma aside at the end of the day and ask her about the monster hunting excursion she and DJ will be going on this weekend. Oma tells me, yeah, she thinks Opa's death opened up a portal in their house and it got haunted. Apparently he died at home and she's been seeing shadow people ever since. She says, "Did DJ tell you about the whistling? I've heard it with my own ears." Their monster hunt was going to be a walk around the backyard with flashlights and crosses, something to put DJ's mind at ease. Today's Tuesday, October 1st, and he still periodically talks about being woken up by things going bump in the night. In his own way, he explained to me the shadow figures that hide in the top corner of his room. It sounds like their paranormal problems stayed the same or have gotten worse. I've reached out to the counselors, but where would any diagnostic procedure realistically fit? Is it a mental health disorder if the grandmother's seeing and hearing the exact same things? What therapist would fit here? This blurs the lines of my mandated reporter duty as well, but don't worry. I called CPS just to ask because I'm constantly paranoid. I waited 20 minutes to make a report, but even they didn't know what to do. They made a note on the file, but that's it. So, the question's in your hands. I'd be so grateful to hear your input. Enlighten me with your knowledge because I'm stumped like the giving tree. Thanks. Having been a nurse for 30 years, I've seen some things that I'm unable to explain. I always tried to find a logical or scientific answer for anything out of the ordinary, but sometimes that wasn't possible. One day, one of the nurses in the post-open heart surgical ICU where I worked went to draw some medication from the Pyxis machine. A Pyxis machine is an automated medication dispenser. You put in your code, the names of all the patients on your unit appear on the screen. You choose yours, and then it displays their meds, and you take them out. Simple. "Who's taking care of Florence?" the nurse asked all of us. "Who?" we said. "We don't have a patient named Florence." I didn't think so. Her name's in our machine. Pharmacy must have screwed up and put her in here instead of where she really is. She called the pharmacy and informed them of their error. "What are you talking about?" the pharmacist asked. "We have the master machine and we enter all of the names in the entire hospital. I'm looking at your machine and there's no one named Florence in your machine." "Well, I'm not crazy. I'm looking at her name right now. If you don't believe me, then come up here yourself," the nurse told him, annoyed. He did. He couldn't explain it. He called the Pyxis company technician. He came to the hospital and didn't know what to make of it either. He said it was impossible to have a name show up in one machine and not appear in the master machine. After a week, her name disappeared on its own. The pharmacy insisted that they hadn't removed it. A A month later, it happened again. As before, her name didn't show up in the master, but it did in ours. It stayed there for a while and then disappeared. After a few months of this, we began to see a pattern. Florence would stay in our Pyxis until 3 people died. Then she'd disappear. It didn't even need to be our patients. Any deaths in the hospital would do. But it was always 3. It reached a point that someone would go to the Pyxis and gasp, "Ladies, hang on to your patience. Florence is back." We would look around nervously. Some of us would even have conversations with the ceiling. "Stay away from my patient, Florence. Go find someone else to take." We used to joke that Florence was a celestial bus driver with a need to fill her big black bus with the dead. Once she had all of her passengers on board, she would drive them to their final destination. Florence, bus driver to the stars. We would hear a code blue called in the hospital and wait a reasonable amount of time, then page the nursing supervisor. "Did the code on 5 West make it?" we would ask. "No." "How many does Florence have now?" Everyone knew about our ghost. "That makes 2. 1 more and she'll leave us for a while." We tried to find out who our ghost was. We checked our records, and we knew that she'd never passed through our ICU. We were at a loss as to why she was targeting us, so to speak. Finally, one of the secretaries got an idea. "Let's look in the death book," she said. The death book was a ledger book, one in which we would handwrite the name of every patient who died in our ICU or in the operating room. It was a huge book, with hundreds of pages of names. But sure enough, we found Florence in the death book. She had died a week before her first appearance in our Pyxis. The reason that we couldn't find any record of her was because she had never made it to our ICU. She was meant to, but she died during surgery on the OR table. We figured that she was haunting us because she wanted to come into the ICU and never got the chance. After almost a year, we decided to send our ghost away. So how does one get rid of a ghost? Exorcism? Seance? No. We planned to do what any group of science-based, educated, rational people would do. Throw a ghost-going-away party. More specifically, a go towards the light party. On the anniversary of her death, we borrowed a CPR mannequin from the education department. We put her in a hospital gown, sat her at the head of our table in the kitchen, and placed a sign around her neck that said, "Hi, my name is Florence." Just chillin' before her party. We printed a huge banner saying, "Bon voyage, Florence. Have a safe trip to the afterlife." And we strung it up in the break room. Everyone brought food and we had a potluck. Within an hour, word had spread all over the hospital that our crazy open-heart ICU nurses were having a party for a ghost. People came from other units just to see if it was true. Like ethereal spirits themselves, young doctors appeared out of thin air, sniffing the scent of our cooking and salivating over the table, groaning with food. Baby docs were always scrounging for a free meal. We heard you were having a party. Do you have any extra food that we could, they said, trying not to look so hungry and desperate. Of course, there's plenty here, we told them as they loaded up their plates with baked ham, fried chicken, potato salad. They all ate hungrily and stared at the mannequin. "So, what's all that about?" they asked between bites. "That's Florence. She's our ghost. We threw her this going-away party so that she'll stop haunting us and gathering the souls of the dead to drive off in her bus," we told them, straight-faced. They glanced at each other warily. "Okay. Hey, is that key lime pie?" After our party, not a day went by that we didn't hold our breath when we accessed the Pyxis machine, searching for her name. She never reappeared. It seems all she wanted was a wake. Rest in peace, Florence. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night, and keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons, whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Mary H, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lizanne, Arlene F, Adrian, and TF Parham. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me. Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.